Hey guys, this is Gaijin Hunter and welcome to part 5 of the Monster Hunter Bestiary version 2024. In this series I'll be going over nearly 230 monsters that have appeared in the Monster Hunter mainline series. I wanted to make sure that this was uniquely something that I could do and include something new for everyone from beginner to seasoned hunter. I will share with you the English and Japanese names, the official nicknames the monsters have in Japanese, which are sometimes but often not referenced in the English localization, and really help give you some insights into how the development team is thinking about and positioning the monsters, as well as I'll give you a bonus fun fact for each one as well. In this video we'll be going over the final, but probably most impactful group, which is the Elder Dragons that appear throughout the mainline games. When I say mainline games, I mean that I'll be excluding games like Monster Hunter Frontier and Monster Hunter Stories, which take place in their own respective universes. Without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, now let's jump in. Part 5, which is the Elder Dragons, or in Japanese, Koryushu, which means the Old Dragon variety. In fact, we're going to start with a fun fact, which is, if you've noticed throughout this series, whenever we refer to Wyvern, we're using the kanji for dragon, which is a ryu. But there's also a less simplified, more original way to write this kanji, which is still used today, which is the first one you're seeing here, which is also ryu. The way that Monster Hunter does it is they use the less simplistic one for dragon, like the Elder Dragons, and everything else in the game is the more simplified one, which they use and call Wyvern. It's just a sort of terminology thing that they do in Monster Hunter, but it's always interesting to see nonetheless. Of course, we have to start with the big boy himself, which is Fatalis. In Japanese, his name is Kokuryu Miraboreyasu, and his nickname is just Kokuryu, which means the Black Dragon. Fun fact for this one is when they were asking the composer to make the song for the final boss, they didn't know yet what they wanted to do, so they just said it's going to be like a endgame stronger version of Rathalos. And that's why you hear the same theme of Rathalos in the theme song for Fatalis. It's just for those historical reasons. Fatalis is special that it has a bunch of variants. They're not subspecies or anything like that. I mean, this is the legendary Black Dragon of the series. The first variant, though, is called Crimson Fatalis, which has a nickname of Koryu, which means the Crimson Dragon. So you would just line it up and say Koryu Miraboreyasu, which is just Crimson Dragon, Crimson Fatalis. The fun fact for this one is that in Japan, most people call it Mirabarukan, or like Mira Vulcan, which is the nickname that's taken from its armor set and what that's called. It's just a better way of differentiating this one from the regular Fatalis. I do love Crimson, especially for its sort of asymmetric horns. It's got one that's more longer than the other. So yeah, I'm happy that it gets its own separate name. Now this next one gets an asterisk, is that this is not recognized in like the encyclopedias or anything. But across fans and just in the game in general, there is a special variant of the variant Crimson Fatalis, which is his glowing red-hot version which appeared in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. Fans have called this the Mirarasu, or the Crimson Wrath Fatalis, and this is taken from the name of its armor set. And fun fact, again, this thing only exists in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate in G rank and is a must-play. So if you do get your hands on a 3DS, make sure you check this one out because it does play different and is much cooler than much hotter than the regular Crimson Fatalis. And the next but not least is the old man himself, the White Fatalis, or in Japanese, Soryu Miraboreyasu, which means the Ancestor Dragon. The fun fact for this one is in Japan, we often refer to it as Mirarutsu, like the roots, the Ancestor Dragon, and this is also taken from the name of its armor set. In Japan, it's a little bit different in English. Sometimes the armor sets have a really cool nickname that doesn't exist inside the monster's name, and often that'll get used as well, and this is just one of those cases. Okay, we're not done with the Black Dragons yet, and I just want to do a quick aside here that when you hear the term Black Dragon, this is something that was like a legend in the Monster Hunter universe forever. Basically, they're the most rare, most, ancient, powerful dragons, and they're so rare and basically part of fables that no one really knows if they're all talking about the same monster or a different one. So for a long time, spottings of Alatreon they thought was just Fatalis. I mean, it certainly fits the bill when it comes to its appearance of being dark, being crazy strong dragons. So yeah, it's not necessarily part of the family of Fatalis, but it's considered a black dragon, which is a group of this and the next legendary one, which you're going to see. This one, of course, is called Alatreon, and in Japanese the name is Alatreon, and the nickname is Kokokuryu, which is the blazing black dragon. The fun fact for this one, and this is probably less fun in English because it's just different the way that they translate it, but all the wyverns in the game, like a Rathalos, have a rare drop called a plate, like a Rathalos plate. In Japanese, that name for plate is actually called the reversed scale. And this comes from an old folklore idea that a dragon has one scale on its body, which has sort of like an ingrown nail, has grown backwards and is pointing the other way, and it hurts. So if you touch it, it becomes incredibly irritable and will probably just kill you. So the idea of the rare reversed scale is the rare item that you get from wyverns. So imagine all the hunters' surprise when their first carve off an Alatreon was one of these reversed scales or plates. You're like, oh my gosh, I got the rare item, and then you carve again and you get another one, and you carve again and you get another one, and then you quickly realize that this is a very special monster, and this elder dragon is covered in reversed scales or plates. So that's one of the cool things when you first fight the monster and you beat it. It catches me every time, and I think it's really cool. And the final monster as part of the black dragon family is Dire Miralis, or in Japanese, Guran Miraosu. Nickname for this one is Rengokuryu, which is the molten black dragon, and this thing is as big as it looks. This was a huge monster that you fought both underwater and on land, and was included in Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. The name here is really cool in Japanese, the nickname, the Rengokuryu. Rengoku is also the same wording or spelling as purgatory, so it sounds really badass. But they're using a slightly different, obviously, kanji for Goku. Instead of it being like hell, they're using black for the black dragon. So it's just really nice. The molten black dragon, which sounds like it's coming out of something like the Bible. Okay, moving on to probably the first really, really large monster, sort of like a raid monster that players got to experience, which is Lao-Shan Lung. In Japanese, it's Lao-Shan Lung. And this is, the nickname is read the same way, Lao-Shan Lung, and it means the old mountain dragon. I believe this is a Chinese pronunciation. It might have a little bit of a twist to it, obviously, because it's Japanese, the way that they're reading it. But it's just literally the word old mountain and dragon strung together. Fun fact for this one, and I love this about Monster Hunter, is that it always tried to bake in a lore reason for all of its game mechanics. And for this one, it was the very first village, which is Kokoto. There was a legend around the Elder, which was a Wyverian, in which he was hunting a Lao-Shan Lung and decided to take his fiancée with him, and she became the 5th member of their hunting party. She tragically died in the hunt, and so it became kind of like an auspicious, like superstitious thing, like the number 5 is considered bad luck. So they decided, of course, very conveniently for the game system requiring 4, not 5, that going forward that the guild would hunt in groups of 4, not 5, because of this tragic story. This thing actually got a subspecies called the Ashen Lao-Shan Lung, or in Japanese, as we've said in other videos, they just use the word Ashu to mean subspecies, so Lao-Shan Lung Ashu. And the nickname for this one's a really interesting way to read it. It's Yenshan Lung, which means the rocky or rock mountain dragon. Fun fact for this one is that it's not actually a subspecies. This is a miscategorization by the guild. This is just a Lao-Shan Lung that got too close to the rubble and is covered in, rocky dust. And it looks like a new species of monster, but it's not. Okay, now we're moving on to the second generation, or they call them the Dos Elders, which is the 3 elder dragons that came sort of at the same time. We're going to start this one out with Kushala Daora. In Japanese, the name is Kushala Daora, and its nickname is Koryu, which means the steel dragon. Obviously named that way because its skin and scales are tough like steel. Fun fact for this one is there's an ecology video. If you look it up on YouTube, lots of people have uploaded it in the older games, where you can see what it looks like after it sheds its skin. It actually is pure white for a moment, until then I think it like oxidizes and becomes hard and metallic like in its sheen. So very cool. I would love to actually be able to see this in game one of these days, but they haven't done it yet. It's just an ecology video. Before a Kushala Daora does sort of gets its nice little sheen, it does start to go into like a molding, sort of like shedding phase, and this is when it gets really hard. If you own a lizard or a reptile that shed, they get very irritable, and the same thing is for this dragon as well. So the rusted Kushala Daora, which in Japanese is Sabita Kushala Daora, which literally just means rusted Kushala Daora, has a nickname of Seikoryu, which is the rusted steel dragon. And this is just a Kushala Daora that is about to shed its skin, turn beautifully white, and then turn into a regular one. So rusted. And the fun fact, and actually not so fun fact, is that Capcom seems committed to this idea that it's just rusted and horrible. So all the weapons from the monster are just trash. Horrible affinity, horrible sharpness, all that kind of stuff. I get it, you know, from a gameplay standpoint, from a story standpoint, but if you're going to make us fight a really hard monster, give us something usable, please. And in Sunbreak, it got another variant called the Risen Kushala Daora. In Japanese, the Risen series of Elder Dragons are called Kai Kokufuku, and then whatever the name of the monster is, that just means that it's an affliction-conquered monster. So this is the Kai Kokufuku Kushala Daora. I'm not going to have much fun facts for these ones, except for they're just really cool. And you should certainly hunt them if you have Sunbreak. They are different and quite challenging. For this one, you will need to unlock Master Rank 120 in order to fight it. The second of the Dos Elder Dragons, the trio, is going to be Chameleos, or in Japanese, Onazuchi. Its nickname is Kasumidyu, which means the Mist Dragon, quite literally. And this sort of item stealing, awesome, chameleon is again one of the 3 second-gen elders alongside Kushala Daora and Teostra. One fun fact that I could include here is that a lot of people used to make jokes about, we'd have a trailer for a new Monster Hunter game and there was nothing being shown but trees, and people would be like, oh, there's a Chameleos in this shot, because of course, it can turn invisible and you wouldn't be able to see it anyways, and eventually we were right. I mean, did you catch it? The first few slides of this video had Chameleos in it. This thing did get a variant, which is the Risen Chameleos in Sunbreak, so Kai Kokufuku Onazuchi for the Affliction Conquered. And this was the first of the Risen Elder Dragons that you could fight, and you unlocked it at Master Rank 110. The next piece of the second generation Elder Dragon puzzle is of course Teostra. In Japanese, he's called Teo Teskatoru, and his nickname is Enoryu, which means the Flame Lord Dragon. And yes, he actually was the Flame Lord. Most of his weapons had the largest amount of flame element on them, until his 4th generation when they introduced the Blast element, which was first introduced in the 3rd one as Slime with Brachydios only, and then it sort of expanded. So when Teostra came back in Monster Hunter for Ultimate, it gained the Blast element, which I think fits it perfectly. And that's why you'll see Blast in a lot of its weapons right now. Teostra is also another one of the afflicted Elder Dragons, so we have the Risen Teostra from Sunbreak. So once again, Kai Kokufuku Teo Teskatoru. And this thing unlocked at Master Rank 140. Next up, and this is quite rare because with Rathian and Rathalos we have a female and male part of the same monster. We have the same thing with Teostra and the female counterpart, which is Lunastra. In Japanese, her name is Nana Teskatori, and her nickname is Enkiryu, which is the Flame Queen Dragon. I'm going to use this opportunity to be incredibly subjective and just call her the Queen of Flaming Trash. I can't stand this monster in Iceborne. I really hated her and the fire that just zaps your health, but you know what? It's my opinion. Maybe you like the monster a lot. But this is the female counterpart to Teostra. Also in 2nd generation, we had a really unique Elder Dragon called Yama Tsukami. In Japanese, its name is identical, just without the space, so it's Yama Tsukami. And its nickname is Fugakuryu, which is the floating peak or floating mound or mountain dragon. There's lots of videos online that you can do and watch of this fight, but it's incredibly unique, especially how it was in DOS versus like the later games. But this monster has not appeared in a very long time in the main series, If it was named today, I think you would probably call it Yamatsu instead of Yama Tsukami, and I'll explain it now in the next monster. Because it shares the same idea of the Japanese name, I'm jumping to the 3rd generation just for this monster to show you Amatsu. In Japanese, its name is Amatsu Magatsuchi, and its nickname is Randyu, which is the Storm Dragon. If you happen to watch the Amatsu Magatsuchi monster feature video on my channel, you might notice already, but its name basically translates directly to the god of heavenly calamity. Now, it's a long subject that I'm not an expert in and I don't want to get into a long tangent on, but old Japanese names of gods would often use this kanji for tsu, which is just sort of like it just means like of. It's just part of a name. It's just a long name. So when you have the Amatsu, the tsu in there is the same as Yama Tsukami. So it's the same idea, so I thought I would include them one by each other. And that's why I think that Yama Tsukami would be more Yamatsu if they were going to translate it in modern day. Okay, going back, I probably should have introduced the scene probably first in the video, but it's a dumb horse, so why not? I just throw it wherever I want, and that is Kirin. Kirin in Japanese is Kirin, and its nickname, which it actually just got recently, is Genju, which means mythical beast. How appropriate. Like Kezu, for some reason this monster went a very long time in the series without having an official nickname in the game in Japanese, so it was kind of special when they added it. The fun fact for this one, of course, is that the Kirin horn is a Rajan's favorite performance-enhancing treat. You can see this in Iceborne when the Furious Rajang has an ecology video in which it rips the horn off of a Kirin and chomps on it, which is supercharging its its thunder ability, which I thought was cool. It's something that they've always hinted at, but they never showed it explicitly until Iceborne came out, and that was just a really cool moment. This annoying dumb horse, which likes to run around, also has a subspecies called the Oroshi Kirin, in Japanese just Kirin Ashu, and its nickname is Kyogenju, which would mean something like the ethereal mythical beast. Fun fact for this one is that it never actually got a nickname in the official games yet, but they are using it officially, so they just added this nickname in the encyclopedia, which came out here just this summer for the 20th anniversary, and I think they did a reprint of its creator's model, and they're using the nickname there as well. So it joins like Kezu and Red Kezu as monsters that recently got nicknames. But yeah, if you want to talk about how geeky the localization team at Capcom can be, when they came up with the name for this one, they went for Oroshi, which is not Oroshi like, minced radish, but it's a really old Japanese word, which means like the cold wind coming down from the mountain. It's so Japanese that they actually have a kanji, which is called a kokuji, which is a kanji that was not originated from China, but was created in Japan. And it's got like the character for down, and then it's below it is the character for wind. So yeah, when they said they really want a very, Kirin is a very Asian-based mythical creature, they wanted a more Asian-sounding name. When they came back with Oroshi Kirin and they told them what those come from, they approved it. And I just think that's the geekiest thing ever. Like, that's more Japanese than I could pull out of my hat. So hats off to the team for coming up with something so unique. Okay, moving on to the 3rd generation, we have the awesome Caedeus? I don't know, correct me down below on how you actually pronounce this. I've always had trouble with it. In Japanese, the name is Nabaru Deusu, and its nickname is Daikairyu, which means the Great Sea Dragon. The fun fact for this monster, and this is probably not a well-known fact because it was from a very obscure magazine interview in 2016, but Nakarkos, who we'll be covering later in this video, feeds on the little babies of this monster, this elder dragon. It joins Nergigante as one of the few that eats other elder dragons. Now, if they weren't babies like hatchlings, there's no way that Nakarkos could eat these things because they get so big and strong. So it's just, I think they're occupying the same sea region, and that's why. I even covered that in my map video, which you can find on my channel as well. But yeah, that's official lore that they shared outside the game, so happy dreams envisioning that. This monster actually did get a subspecies, which is called the Goldbeard Caedeus. Japanese name is Nabaru Deus Ashu. and nickname is Kokaidu, which means the Emperor Sea Dragon. Fun fact for this monster, if you don't use bowguns, the level 3 normal shot has a special effect to it, where if you hit it in between, let's say like the arm and the torso of a monster, it's larger, it can ricochet and get additional hits of damage off. This monster is so big and its beard is so big as well, that you could just pelt off normal shot level 3s and it would ricochet multiple times across its face and body, and you can kill this monster in record time. So this was probably the most fun monster to use bowguns on, just for that fact alone. Moving on, we have the awesome, huge spectacle hunt, which is Jhen Mohran. In Japanese, the name is Jhen Mohran, and its nickname is Hozanryu, which means the peak mountain or mountain peak dragon. And this thing definitely is as big as a peak of a mountain. It's got different phases and everything. You fight it on a ship. It's cool, and I hope they bring it back. The fun fact, and this is kind of a sad fact, but you know how like in anime or movies they show people like shedding tears of anger or frustration? I actually had that once in my life, which was when I was playing Monster Hunter 3G. This was my first Monster Hunter. I was desperately hooked. I was a Lance main, and it was on the 3DS, and nobody in my workplace was playing the game because I had, gotten into it at a point where I guess people around me weren't playing it. So there was no online. It wasn't on Wii U yet, so I had no choice but to fight this thing solo. Now, G rank back then did not scale, so you had to take down a monster that had the health of assuming 4 hunters as a solo hunter. This was made even harder because in this fight, if it destroys the ship, you fail the mission, and you have to take all 45-50 minutes to either kill or repel the monster without letting the ship be killed. This was incredibly hard to do solo, and it took me almost, I want to say like a week and a half of constantly trying to win, getting to like the last 1 or 2 minutes only to find the ship gets destroyed and I failed the quest. I didn't give up though. I kept at it, and I discovered that the inside of its mouth is a 90% hit zone. It's really squishy, and you only get a few opportunities to get in there to do some attacks, but by making sure that I was able to get inside of its mouth and get some hits off, throw some large barrel bombs in there, that allowed me to go over the damage threshold and finally defeat this monster so I can continue on my first G rank journey as a solo hunter new to the franchise. So yeah, quite an experience trying to take this thing down solo in G rank. As a solo hunter. I don't think I'll try that ever again. This thing actually got a subspecies as well, called the Hollowed Jhen Mohran, or just Jhen Mohran Ashu. Its nickname here is Dezandu, which means the ghost or phantom mountain dragon. And the Hollowed here is like, like sacred, like the hallowed land, because it's got that like special hue to it. But in Capcom's localization blog, which I really hope they bring back because I've always found these really fascinating, they talked about how the team was really pushing for a name like Elysian Jhen Mohran, obviously from Elysium, right? The place you go when you die and stuff like that. And I think that is the coolest name. But they were denied the name powers to be the director. They decided, no, that doesn't work. We want Hollowed, even though that was a long name, and they ended up having to abbreviate it to like H dot in item names because it was too long. But it's just a kind of reminder that, the Loke team wins some, they lose some, but I think throughout the years they've been able to win a lot more, and I love some of their names for the subspecies. So yeah, Capcom, if you're listening, you done goofed. In the 3rd generation, you should listen to your Loke team. This was a cool name. In 4th generation, we got another very similar type monster, which was Daren Mohran. In Japanese, it's Daren Mohran, and the nickname is Gozanryu, which is the large or great mountain dragon. The fun fact for this one is something I'll never forget, which was like 1 week away from the release of Monster Hunter 4 here in Japan. They were doing a live stream where they were showing off the game and doing some hunts, and they were showing off the Gathering Hall. And inside of it, they were showing off the chat system, which you can use with the touchscreen of the Nintendo 3DS. And so they were like showing that you can type up stuff, and they were like, well, what should we write? And they said, well, how about who? Like, who do you want to hunt or whatever? So that's Dare. And when they wrote Da and then they put De, in the autocomplete, it popped up Jhen Mohran. Like, the name of the monster popped up in the autocomplete. They've never announced this monster. They weren't supposed to. And so the internet went ablaze once we saw this. They quickly tried to cover it up and, like, move on as if nothing happened. But it was, like, really obvious because Jhen Mohran is a very well-known name. So hearing Jhen Mohran, we're like, oh my god, we're getting a new Jhen Mohran. And of course, that was the intro of the game, so it wasn't going to be a very big spoiler for very long, but I always thought that was hilarious that the autofill chat would be the reason why they accidentally leaked that monster's name. Okay, before you get out your pitchforks, yes, this is not technically an Elder Dragon, or is it? In the game, they've always classified Gore Magala, or Gore Magala, as unknown, or question. But in the evolutionary sort of charts of the monsters, you'll notice that they do categorize it alongside Shagaru, which is an Elder Dragon, and it's in the category of Elder Dragons. So in my eyes, it fits here both because, you know, of its relationship with Shagaru Magala, which we're going to be getting to, and also just because, I mean, it eventually becomes it, right? So yes, it's not an Elder Dragon at this point in its life, which is also why you can use traps on it and stuff like that, but just bear with me and let's get through it. So the nickname for this one is Kokushokuryu, which is the Black Eclipse Wyvern. Very cool name. And yeah, not only was this thing our flagship for Monster Hunter 4, and first introduced to the West in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, but yeah, it's not technically an Elder Dragon, but it will grow into one, which leads us to our next monster. And that is Shagaru Magala, or in Japanese, Shagaru Magala, same name. Its nickname in Japanese is Tenkairyu, which is the Heavenly Cycle Dragon, because there's a sort of a story of a cycle of it coming and going and stuff like that. And this is affectionately nicknamed, I think, by the community as Shaggy. I definitely call it Shaggy quite a bit as well. And the fun fact for Shaggy, and this is kind of a crazy one, which is how they give birth. So Shagaru Magalas have they have like the germ cells inside the virus that they infect other monsters with. And when a monster gets infected then dies, you know, there's rare cases where the germ cells can then feed off of the flesh of that monster and become a baby. And every rare so often they become a Gore Magala. And a Gore Magala, when it gets of age, will either evolve into a Shagaru Magala, like through molding and shedding and stuff like that, or something tragic can happen, which we'll touch about in just a minute. This is another of the Elder Dragons in Sunbreak that got a variant, which is the Risen Shagaru Magala. In Japanese, here's a mouthful, it's Kai Kokufuku Shagaru Magala. And this thing didn't unlock until Master Rank 180, so my assumption is a lot of you, or a lot of people, never got the chance to hunt this monster, which is a shame, because it was a really fun fight. Okay, so story time, I'll try to keep this light, but a Gore Magala, right? It starts to get older, it molds, it's going to evolve and turn into the Shagaru Magala it's meant and destined to be. Problem is that the Shagaru Magala, there's only one in the Forbidden Land, and it does not like to share its territory. So inside the frenzy virus of the Shagaru, it's got cells that will attack monsters with the frenzy virus, like attack Gore Magala. So this is a Gore Magala who was nearby where a Shagaru Magala was, and instead of going through with the whole molding process, it's actually getting stopped in between. So it's halfway changed and halfway not, and it's being eaten alive by the virus which is inside of its body. It's a huge, it's so tragic. And that's why it's called the Chaotic Gore Magala. And this is technically a variant of Gore Magala, so not an Elder Dragon. This is the Elder Dragon that never was. The name of this variant in Japanese is Konton ni Umeku Gore Magala, which means the Gore Magala that screams out in chaos. And the nickname is the same as Gore Magala, so Kokushokuryu, which is the Black Eclipse Wyvern. So everything about this monster I think is super cool. Its name, Chaotic Gore Magala, is very close to the nickname of the variant in Japanese. Konton means chaos, Konton ni means in chaos, and Umeku means to scream out. So this is, it captures the feeling, right? And really it's got cool armor, cool weapons. one of the things that I really like is that the male armor set was the Chaotic series, and the female armor set was called the Nephilim series, which of course is the mix between a half angel, half human in some myths, and that's why, you know, the right side of its body has evolved into Shagaru, and the left side is still stuck as Gore Magala, and it's not going to evolve. It's going to suffer in pain until it dies, and so it's super aggressive, wants to just attack anything, and who can blame it? Okay, next one, and one of my favorite elder dragons in the entire series is Gogmazios. In Japanese, his name is Gogmazios, so pretty much the same. Nickname is Kyogekiryu, which means the large halberd dragon, which is of course referring to the large dragonator which is sticking outside of its body. Fun fact for Gogma is, one, I do have a monster feature for this monster on my channel, so look it up, Gaijin Hunter Gogmazios, or Gogma feature, and you'll see it. But the fun fact for this one is, in the game it never had a special icon. Like all the other Elder Dragons, it was just a question mark icon. But on March 23rd, 2015, they announced that there would be a new Gashapon series, like little capsule toys, in which they had these like knitted sort of like pin badge collections. And they had an icon shown of Gogma, which was never shown before, and this was official merchandise by Capcom. I tweeted it, and the very next day, I got an incredibly high-resolution, wonderful trace redrawing by a hunter called Kevin Navia. He kindly shared it with me the next day, and I believe this is the render that, or this art, is the icon that everyone's been using now for many years. Was done by him, and this was a recreation of the icon that was shared in the photo that I uploaded, so we all have Kevin to thank for this awesome icon. But since it's been used in other places, it's appeared in Monster Hunter encyclopedias and places like that, and I always thought this icon was just the coolest thing ever, so I use it on my channel. I still use it, I think, on my Tumblr, and yeah, that's the origin of this icon. Next up was the incredibly long serpent called the Dalamadur. This is in Japanese Dalamadur, and its nickname is Jaoryu, which is the Serpent King Dragon. And this was the online boss of Monster Hunter 4, and it was crazy big, and actually one of my first major videos that took off. I did a tutorial video because it was really hard to understand what to do during this hunt because there were so many body parts, and the arena was really unique, and I use like MS Paint to draw like the arena, and you guys watched it and you commented and you helped me get started, so thank you for that. Fun fact for this monster is that it is literally the foundation of the Rotten Vale. One or more Dalamadurs made their way to the New World and died and became skeletons, and as you go down the ramp of the Rotten Vale, you'll see the shoulder blades, and there is a skull of it down below as well. So I really hope they bring back the Dalamadur, because we've got culture of it now in both Monster Hunter 4, the 4th generation, and the New World. It'd be cool to see them find a way to bring this hunt back. The Dalamadur also got a subspecies in the G rank, or Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, called the Sha Dalamadur. In Japanese, just Dalamadura Ashu, and its nickname is Jateryu, which is the Serpent Emperor Dragon. And the fun fact for this one is the guild be gilding again. This is not actually a scientific subspecies. We later find out through the ecology video that this, very similar to how the rusted Kushala Daora is just a variant of the regular one, this is just a Dalamadur that's finally molted. It's shed, it's become of age, and now has all this awesome fire capabilities. So the game still treats it as a subspecies, but technically it's not. But super cool hunt. Okay, moving on, we've got Valstrax, or in Japanese, Barufaruku. Its nickname is Tensuiryu, which means the Comet Dragon. And you know, Capcom's always said that Elder Dragons are like, they can defy logic, right? They don't have to make sense with their ecology or anything like that. They're meant to be cool monsters that you fight, and that's it. But I'll tell you, like, if you look into it, they've spent an obscene amount of time trying to come up with reasons of how this monster actually works. Like, how does it have the dragon energy? How does it soar through the sky so fast? And I just find it hilarious that they spend so much time when they'll come right back and say, it's an elder dragon, don't think about it too deeply. Well, obviously they do, and I think it's a cool detail. And the fun fact for this one is one of those cool details is Because this thing flies so high in the sky, it would be exposed to UV or ultraviolet radiation, which would kill it. And one of the reasons it doesn't get affected by it is because it's got a mirroring type of silver sheen on its scales. So that explains why it's silver, is because it needs to be. This awesome monster also got a variant called the Crimson Glow Valstrax. The Japanese nickname for this is Kushiki Kakuyo no Baruharuku, which is something like miraculously glowing Valstrax, but something very close to Crimson Glow Valstrax. For this one, they said that it came so late in development that they had sort of ran out of their ideas of the Japanese yokai, and for this one they just wanted to go with something that was more ominous. So they went with Halley's Comet as sort of the inspiration for design, which of course, back in the day, maybe still today, was seen as something ominous or like a bad omen of something. And God be with me, help me get through the pronunciation of this monster, but probably the most mouthful I've had in all these videos is the variant that was given to it in Sunbreak, which is the Risen Crimson Glow Valstrax. In Japanese, this is just compound words. So we've got the Kai Kokufuku Kushiki Kakuyo no Baruharuku, which is the Affliction Conquered Crimson Glow Valstrax. Try saying that 5 times fast. And this theme was unlocked at Master Rank 160. I apologize for jumping back and forth throughout the generations, but it's just the nature of the Elder Dragons and trying to explain them in a way that I think is easier to digest. But we're going back to Monster Hunter Generations now, and we've got Nakarkos. Its Japanese name is Ostogaroa, and its nickname is Gairyu, which means the skeleton or skeletal dragon. Of course, similar how Kirin is like a mythical beast, it's a horse, for God's sake. This thing is a squid, but they're going to call it a dragon anyways, because Elder Dragon is just a category in this game. This was actually teased out like 2 years before Monster Hunter Generations came out. It was during the 10th anniversary. They had sort of all these like message cards from all the different directors and artists and producers and composers of the series, and Ichinose-san had a drawing of this like skeleton dragon that would use like skeletons of other monsters and stuff to attack the hunter, and he had drawn it on his 10th anniversary card, and you know, it caught a lot of our eyes like, wait, is this going to be a thing? And sure enough, it became the sort of idea that spawned into Nakarkos. Moving on to Monster Hunter World, we of course had the flagship Nergigante, or in Japanese, Nergigante, so very similar name. Nickname is Metsujinryu, which means the Annihilation Dragon. The fun fact for this monster is similar to Gore Magala in that it has a very weird way of reproducing. So it's not, what would you call it, heterosexual. It doesn't have male or female. It can pretty much spawn itself. And apparently it's got the ingredients to make itself inside of its spikes. So I don't know how that works, but apparently its spikes can be shot out and then eventually grow into little baby Nergigantes. I have no idea. I think this fits in the realm of it's an Elder Dragon, it's cool, it sounds weird, let's just run with it. He got a variant in the same game, which is Ruiner Nergigante. Has quite a mouthful of a Japanese name. It's Kotogotoku o Horobosu Nergigante, which basically means the Nergigante which annihilates all. And this was a really cool monster that unlocked, I believe, at Master Rank 100. I guess a fun fact for this one, if you consider it a fun fact, is that it joins the Seething Basilgeuse and the Narwa, the All-Mother, in having one of the longest possible names in Japanese. Of course, that Afflicted, Risen, Crimson Glow Valstrax would be a contender, but that's not really a monster name, that's just a compound of different conditions, where this one is a really long nickname for the variant. So 12 characters, 16 if spelled out completely. Yeah. Kotogotoku o Horobosu Nergigante. Say that 10 times fast. Actually not that bad compared to Crimson Glow Valstrax. Next up is the big boy himself, which is Zorah Magdaros. In Japanese, the name is Zorah Magdaros, and its nickname is Yozanryu, which is the Molten Mountain Dragon. The fun fact for this one is something that it seems like I was the last one to know. It seemed to be very common knowledge, but the Guiding Lands is basically the dead corpse of a Zorah Magdaros that's now become its own sort of ecology. It's got all these different areas that can go up and down and vertical and have different seasons. So if you ever hunted in the Guiding Lands, you're hunting on top of an old Zorah Magdaros. Continuing on with the 5th generation Elder Dragons, which we had a lot of, is Namielle. In Japanese, the name is Nergigante, and the nickname is Meidyu, which is simply the Abyssal or Abyss Dragon. And this is something that I covered in my recent evolutionary tree video for the monsters of the series, but it's really rare for an Elder Dragon to be connected to another Elder Dragon. They kind of have their own lineage, but Namielle actually is related distantly to Chameleos. They sort of have a common ancestor and then deviated at some point in history to become their own species of monster, which I think is really fascinating. Hopefully the fact that they're willing to commit that much to lore means that they plan on bringing this cool monster back. Stirring in the depths of the Rotten Vale was Vaal Hazak. In Japanese, the name is Vaal Hazak, and the nickname of Shitoryu, which is the corpse Latin or corpse dragon. I guess one fun fact which I can share with you is that me and my daughter, as we played through the game, we had nicknames for a lot of monsters. This one in particular sort of sticks in my memory, which is, it's like a zombie because it like rises from the dead, and it seems to have like a really fleshy like substance on its body, like it's just like it ran through like the trash of a restaurant. So we would nickname it Zombifu. Which is like zombie beef dragon. We both love the monster. We find it very cute. I know a lot of people looked at me awkward and said you have a weird definition of cute, but the squeal and the vacuum, the Dyson vacuum type of squeal that it does, the inhaling, everything about it I think is just adorable. And maybe it's just because we're very much into reptiles. It's got that kind of vibe to it. So yeah, Vaal Hazak, good memories. This monster also eventually got its own variant, which is called the Black Veil Vaal Hazak. In Japanese, it's Shiomato Vaal Hazaku. Shiomato, shi means death. O just means, like connects the subject to a verb. And mato means to be clad in or to be covered in. So it's covered in death. It's a very gothic, very nice name. The fun fact for this one, I guess, because I had a hard time coming up with a fun fact for it, because it is kind of what it is that because of the spores that are all over its body and it's just like puffing out this mist out, it sort of creates this like veil which makes it blind. I think that's probably where they got the name Black Veil, and that's why you got that sort of like gothic bride outfit, I think, for it, is because of the veil that covers its eyes. Cool monster, and I loved the effects of it fighting it in the ancient forest. We are nearing the end, and we have the final monster of base Monster Hunter World, which is Xeno'jiiva. In Japanese, name is Xeno'jiiva, so same name, and its nickname is Meitoryu, which is the phantom or ghostly lit dragon, taking after that sort of surreal, ghostly like blue-white veil that it has all over its body. I like the name a lot, so I'm going to make that the fun fact. Xeno, of course, is common word today, which means strange, foreign, or unknown, because it's seen as very alienish. And Jiva is from the Sanskrit word, I believe. It comes from the concept of a living entity or soul. So yeah, this is a strange entity that is filled with the life stream energy. Makes perfect sense. And of course, one of the Xeno'jiivas did manage to get away long enough to shed and bolt over and over again and become its adult form, which is Safi'jiiva. In Japanese, the name is actually kind of different. It's Mufeto Jiva, and the nickname is Sekiryu, which is simply Red Dragon. Honestly, with the connection of Alatreon and Fatalis coming afterwards, and the fact that Fatalis is just called the Black Dragon, I thought that there would be some story sort of connecting these things, and maybe they might do it one day, but the name definitely sticks out as something that feels very similar on the same playing field as the Black Dragon. Then for Monster Hunter World Iceborne, we had the new Elder Dragon, Velkhana. In Japanese, the name is Iverukana, and the nickname is Hyoryu, which is the Ice Dragon. Fun fact for this one is that it has one of the best theme songs of monsters in the series. It's called the Splendiferous Silver Sovereign. You can go ahead and look that up on YouTube, but it was ranked into one of the top 10 fan favorites in the poll that they did for the 20th anniversary. We were at the concert where they were talking about it. The composer was saying how she sort of thought as Nergigante as the king, then this would be the queen. And so we kind of thought this was confirmation that Velkhana was a female monster, or at least a version of that species, but In most of the other stuff that we see, I think it refers to it as like a male monster, probably because it's got all those decorative features, you know, for territorial disputes and to appeal to the females of its race. So I don't know whether or not it is or not, but all signs seem to point that it's a male monster. So hey, maybe they'll grace us with a female Velkhana one day. However, when it comes to is this a lady, I don't think there's any dispute about Kulve Taroth, which is Mamu Taroto in Japanese. The nickname is Dankiryu, which is the gleaming or bling dragon as I like to call it. And she is awesome. I think the fun fact for her is that her body frame appears to be the same as the Great Jagras, which is hilarious because she's like one of the end game siege monsters, and she's basically using the same body as the very beginning runt monster of the game. This was the first time that they did a siege hunt in the game, and I thought it was a cool format, and I hope they do it again. The fun fact for her is that she's got, if you count in like the Area 1, the Area 2 and 3, 4, 5, the final, the chase versions, the variants when you are mounted on her, she's got like 12 different songs that are exclusive. Also, like the theme song that's played in the Gathering Hall when her quest is available is also unique. So yeah, I don't know of any monster that's gotten that many weapons because they're randomized and that many theme songs to boot. So she is the queen. In rounding out Iceborne is the final Iceborne boss, which is Shara Ishvalda. In Japanese, the name is An Ishwaruda, and the nickname is Jiteiryu, which means the land tremor or the land screaming dragon. The fun fact for this one, and there's been a lot of debate in the community on whether or not it's actually this or not, but a lot of people felt that no matter where your camera was facing, that the monster looked like it was staring right at you, the player, almost breaking the fourth wall. And I think this just has to go with like, sort of like they do with like the Haunted Mansion or something at Disneyland, where there's a way of designing wall sculptures and eyes so that it looks like it's following you. But I do love that in the, for some reason, unpublished encyclopedia for Iceborne, they kind of like call this out. They mention that it might have some other sense of sensory perception going on with its eyes, but who could know for sure because this thing is still evolving, is how they say it in the book. And I find it funny. It sort of like leaves it open for interpretation and says, hey, if you've got a fan theory about it, hey, it could be right. We can't deny it. So, nice little note from Capcom, and I'm still curious why the heck they didn't release the translated version of that encyclopedia, because I know it was planned. Jumping into Monster Hunter Rise, we've got Wind Serpent Ibushi, which in Japanese is Ibushi Makihiko, and the nickname is Fujinryu, which is the Wind Deity Dragon. The fun fact for this, besides the fact that they never released a version of this monster that was hard, like Ibushi is just a pushover, he only gets some loving every 50 years or so. That's the cycle of mating between it and the female version of the same monster, which is Narwa, who comes up next. But yeah, their mating cycle is every 50 years, which is, coincides with the rampage. Ibushi causes storms just as a natural side effect of being an elder dragon, crying out for its counterpart, looking for Narwa. When they do finally meet, he has a pretty funny fate. Speaking of his mate is the Thunder Serpent Narwa, which is the female counterpart of the same monster. The name is Naru Hatata Hime in Japanese, and the nickname is Daijinryu, which is the Thunder Deity Dragon. I suppose a fun fact for her is that there's not a lot of monsters in which both the male and female counterpart of the same species is included as a huntable monster in the game. So she joins monsters like Rathian, Celtis Queen, and Lunastra. So it's a small group, but I definitely love seeing just how much variation they could do with the same monster, and I hope this is a tradition that they can carry forward going into the next games. Narwa has a special variant called Narwa the All-Mother. The name in Japanese is quite interesting. It's Hyakuryu no Engen Naru Hatata Hime. Hyakuryu is the name they use. It means 100 wyverns, but it's the name they use in English for the rampage. So this is the origin or the source of the rampage, which is Narwa the All-Mother. The fun fact, fun for her, maybe not for Ibushi, is that she joins the Celtis Queen and that she does cannibalism after their mating. So shout outs, pour one out for Ibushi, F's in chat. Poor boy finally found his mate and then gets eaten. I feel so bad for that monster. Monster Hunter Sunbreak also gave us a new Elder Dragon in its flagship monster Malzeno or Malzeno, I'm not sure which it was. In Japanese it's Meduzena, and the nickname here is Shakugindu, which means the Silver Duke Dragon because it's kind of royalty in the story of Sunbreak. And of course, where all the monsters in Rise, or a vast majority of them, were based off of Japanese yokai, the monsters in Sunbreak were based off of Western monster motifs, and this one, of course, is based on the vampire. Kind of a duh thing, but felt it was worth mentioning. And Malzeno had a variant called the Primordial Malzeno. In Japanese, it's Gensho Kizamu Meduzena, which is sort of just saying like the Malzena that marks the first, because this, as a fun fact, is actually the original sort of way the monster used to look and act. It was actually pretty docile when it came to living alongside humans. The people in the kingdom even looked at it as sort of like a guardian. And this thing sort of took an L for the team and ended up getting attacked by the Curio and being transformed into what we now know as Malzeno. But this is its original form before it sort of got its butt kicked by the next monster. And this brings us to our very final Elder Dragon and pretty much wrapping up this entire series, which is Gaizmagorum. In Japanese, the name is Gayaderemu, and the nickname is Meiendu, which is the Abyssal Chasm Dragon, or the Abyss Chasm Dragon. Fun fact, I guess, is that this thing was cool, but not really, I think, not really like, end boss kind of stuff. I think even more deadly than this thing was probably just the Curio, which sort of has using it as a host, and it has got a symbiotic relationship. I think the Curio presented much more of a scarier risk and threat than this monster did, but it certainly was a spectacle, and there were some cool moments during the fight, but it wasn't a monster that I think I hunted all that much once I made its armor. So yeah, I was kind of hoping that we'd have a more explosive final boss for the game, but we didn't. But eventually they would give us the risen Elder Dragons, which I think served as, the true endgame bosses for Sunbreak, and certainly cool. So if you got time to do more Sunbreak before the release of Monster Hunter Wilds, definitely try to get to the point where you can fight out the risen Elder Dragons. I think they are super special, and they certainly deserve their place in this list as special variants of the Elder Dragons. And that concludes the list here of all the Elder Dragons in the mainline series leading up to Monster Hunter Wilds next year. What did you guys think? Was it fun going through and, down memory lane? Some of these monsters I never got to fight in their original sort of permutations, so I had to do some research and look into them, and there's still a lot I don't know. But do let me know down in the comments below if you have some really special memories of any of these Elder Dragons. I know I certainly did, and hopefully I was able to share some here today. I am going to be releasing the entire Bestiary as a one combined video, so if you're watching this as a combined video, then thank you for sticking around to the very end, which is a very long video. Or if you've been watching this as a series, thank you so much for your continued watching of all my videos, and hope you guys found this a fun exercise. I can't wait for 2025 to find out what new Elder Dragons or new monsters we're going to get to add to this Bestiary, but this concludes the full list of, I think, 229 monsters in the Monster Hunter mainline series games leading up to Monster Hunter Rise. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for your continued support. And until next time, happy hunting.